Hello there. Welcome in. Thanks for stopping by, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're streaming the shows on the platforms, the digital streaming platforms of those two radio stations, which are both free to download, free to use, and sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. I certainly do appreciate it. We'll get through this together. Over the course of the program, a veritable cornucopia of topics as long as they have to do with Game 4 and the future of the Colorado Avalanche. I am here for your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show if you are watching this show anywhere you may be scrolling currently. By all means, drop a comment. There's great conversation going into Game 4. I have high expectations for what you guys are going to bring to the table in the day after. But allow me to start. Frustrating, sad, empty. Few of the words that were thrown around by the Avalanche last night after they were swept by the Golden Knights. And I want to throw another word into the mix here. Humbling. It has to be extremely humbling when everything you have built yourself up to be over the course of 82 games, reinforced through 2 playoff series, to have that rebuked in such a decisive manner has to be incredibly humbling. Now, there is no arguing at this point that this version of the Vegas Golden Knights is better than this version of the Colorado Avalanche. Have to be fair here. And yes, this version of the Colorado Avalanche didn't have Cale Makar for 2 games. And he was limited in Game 3. Fair enough. But part of who this team was supposed to be was that they were as deep as any team in the league. That's what the last few years after the last Stanley Cup run were all about, right? Got to get deeper, more depth, roll 4 lines, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies. They were supposed to have all of that. So, one, I would argue that this team should have found a way to win even with Cale Makar absent for a game, maybe. Or how about the game where he played and they were up 3-0? But that's the thing here. And I talked about this yesterday, the idea of the Avalanche getting swept. This fate is so much worse than if they would have lost in 6 games. Because no lead that they had at any point was safe. And every lead Vegas had, they could not overcome. The Golden Knights had an answer for everything Colorado did, and the Avalanche had no answers for anything Vegas did. Not at least not the answers to ultimately come out on top. The second period of Game 3, where they gave up a 3-goal lead, is going to be probably the indelible image of this series. It's probably what you're going to remember first. But what I'm going to remember right after that is the second half of both Game 3 and Game 4, where the Avalanche were flailing futilely, trying to generate one shot on Carter Hart. They couldn't even do this with Cale Makar, by the way, the last 2 games. The second half of game 3 and 4, they could not generate anything. They went the last 13 minutes of the second period before they finally got a shot in on Carter Hart to end the period. And the only goal that they got in the game last night, and the only shot they seemed to have in the entire third period, was almost a hockey trick shot that was the puck bounced off the ice and over the shoulder of Carter Hart. That's how the Avalanche had to score their 1 goal last night. And by the way, they did not do it 5-on-5. The purest form of hockey. You get 5 players and a goalie. We get 5 players and a goalie. Let's see who's better. 5-on-5. The Avalanche were not better than Vegas enough to even win 1 game out of this series. This is why getting swept matters. Because it is such an abrupt end to the season, but also because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a complete rebuke of who you are. You think that you're this? Oh, no, we're going to teach you in the harshest way possible that you're not what you think you are. Vegas is that team. Colorado is not. And that's why all of this is so shocking, because we have so much evidence to the contrary. We have 82 games. We have 9 games against LA and in Minnesota to say they are this team. We are what we thought they were. And Vegas in 4 games just goes, no. Everything you thought about this team, it's not true. Not when it matters. This feels a lot like 2021. Not just because the Avalanche lose to the Golden Knights, but the feeling after. Right? These, what happened with Seattle was the whole Valeri Nichushkin thing, and they were coming off of a Stanley Cup, unacceptable loss to be sure, but not didn't bring on an existential crisis. Okay? Even the 2 losses to Dallas, it was kind of like, well, Dallas is a bad matchup for Colorado. If they didn't have to match up with Dallas, they'd be fine. Right? Just a bad matchup. They're not fundamentally flawed. But now you avoid Dallas. And you play Vegas once again. And it does lead you to an existential crisis. It does make you question everything you thought this team was. If this would have been a 6-game or 7-game nail biter, then I think you would have to, tip your cap or tap your stick to make the metaphor work for hockey and say Vegas was better. But then you could get into, well, they didn't have Cale Makar for 2 games. How limited was Nathan McKinnon at the end of this game? And you could start to talk yourself into, yeah, Colorado was still the team I thought, but they were just hurt. Or this bounce didn't go their way. Or Carter Hart just stood on his head. Yeah, that was game 1. Thereafter, you couldn't even test Carter Hart. After game 1, Vegas could have won the series without Carter Hart. But that's what happens. If the Avalanche lose in 6 or 7 games, then you can talk yourself into a lot of different scenarios. How can you when they get swept? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the Avalanche in an alternate timeline winning this series. We're just talking about with their season on the line, They had everything to lose, or they could have lost. Jared Bednar tried to make it. We have nothing to lose. But you get my point. The stakes were much different for Colorado. It could have been a gentleman's sweep, and we would have maybe have a different discussion. But the fact of the matter is, the Avs went into a game that they absolutely had to win, and Vegas could have been good losing it. It wouldn't have changed the perspective of the series if Vegas loses last night, but yet they don't. This isn't about the Avs not being able to beat the Vegas Golden Knights in a 7-game series. This is about the Colorado Avalanche not being able to beat Vegas in a single game of this series. That is what's so stark. That is what makes you think something significant needs to happen. It needs to change in order for the Avalanche to get where we all thought they were going this year. And I'll say it again. I look at this team, even last night, I look up and down the roster, and I have a hard time believing, if we're going to compare this to the Nuggets, and certainly there's some parallels here. I don't believe that the Avalanche don't have enough talent to win. I just don't. And that's why I'm as shocked as you are about the result of this series, because I just look at it and I'm like, what are they missing? But that's the point. They're somewhere embedded in this team is a fatal flaw. And they have to find it. Is it with their core? Is it with their coach? Is it with players, for instance, like Marty Necas and Brock Nelson, who you brought in to try and make yourself deeper, but they may not be built for these moments? I mean, all options are on the table right now. And I'll let you tell me at 719-247-1313. But there's something inherently wrong with this team. And Vegas, to their credit, was able to exploit that fatal flaw over and over and over again. The fact that the Avs were swept matters. It's not just, that's the trivia question. They got swept in 4 instead of got beat in 5. No, it matters that they lost in 4. It means that they're going to have very difficult conversations about who they are and their viability moving forward. Because I'll throw this out here and then we'll take a break and really get into the conversation here. I mentioned 2021, and now we're here in 2026. 2021, the Vegas Golden Knights exposed the Colorado Avalanche as being somewhat fraudulent, not being built for the postseason. Okay? 2022, the Vegas Golden Knights make their move for Jack Eichel, basically punting on that season in order to be better the next one. Avalanche end up winning the Stanley Cup. 2023, Vegas wins. Now they meet up again a few years later, and Vegas once again unceremoniously bounces the Colorado Avalanche from the playoffs. Could Vegas have, there's, especially with these two Dallas series, there's been the thought that again, either the Avs would have beaten Edmonton had they gotten the chance, or in a world where Edmonton doesn't make it out of the West, Colorado's still the best team, or the next best team. Right? It's just Dallas is a bad matchup. Right? That's what the conversation has been the last 2 years. Are we so sure that Vegas hasn't actually been that team this whole time? That it's been Vegas who has been lurking in a world that Edmonton doesn't make it out. You know, maybe even if the Avs would have gotten past Dallas in the last couple of years and met up with Vegas, their fate might have been the same. But the thing with Vegas is it goes beyond just being a bad matchup. And even Dallas last year, there was the whole Mikko Rantanen of it all and all this kind of stuff that I'm not so sure that the Avs were better built to beat Dallas, just these unforeseen circumstances in which Mikko Rantanen ends up with his revenge series against the Colorado Avalanche. I'm looking at Vegas and I'm saying maybe they're the bad matchup. But it goes beyond that. Vegas is exposing something. Not that only Vegas can exploit. Because this is where you bring in the 2 Dallas series and you bring in Seattle. And you look at where the Avalanche have finished the last few years, a couple of first-round exits, now losing in the Western Conference Final. Maybe this whole time it hasn't been about, oh, this team is a bad matchup or that team is a bad matchup. There might be something fundamentally flawed with this team that will inevitably cost them at some juncture in the playoffs. Some kind of self-destruct button. Maybe that's what Vegas has exposed, and what Chris McFarland needs to do is figure out what that is and get rid of it. Is it personnel? Is it the coach? Is it the mentality? Again, all options are on the table. When you get swept and you lose the way you did, this is not a run it back situation. It can't be. Something has to change with this team, or else next year it's not going to go any better. And maybe it's Vegas, maybe it's Dallas, maybe it's another team. I don't think it's about bad matchups. I think we're past this. Seattle, Dallas twice, now Vegas. Really twice. You have 1 year that seems different than all the rest when they won the Stanley Cup. Every other year seems to end in complete and utter disaster. Is that just because they happen to run up against a bad matchup every year? Because it's different teams. That's what Chris McFarland's going to have to figure out. And that's what we'll try to help him do today, being the good people that we are. 719-24-7-1313. More like Rocky Mountain Low, am I right? Sometimes you just got to inject a little bit of humor, even if it's not that humorous. Avs lose 2-1 in Game 4, are swept away by the Golden Knights. There is a fatal flaw with this team. Every year since they won the Stanley Cup, they have lost at different junctures to different teams. So I don't know if it's what we believed it was after last year, which is, it's Dallas. I don't know that it's a Dallas issue. Now, there's a certain level of team that triggers this fatal flaw or pushes this self-destruct button, right? Not everybody can do it. And that's the thing here with the Colorado Avalanche. It's of no solace to anybody. But the Avs are still one of the best teams in the league. In fact, there's even a world where we might say that they're the second best team in the league, only behind Vegas when all is said and done. Although I would caution you, because Carolina, they kind of get up in your business just like Vegas did. So I'm not in a world where they don't play Vegas. Are we having the same conversation after a Stanley Cup final against Carolina? But that's, our minds wandering too far. We got to keep it where it is right now and talk about why the Avalanche lost to Vegas and why they couldn't win. And again, this isn't about the series. Okay, I think many of us were done with the idea that the Avalanche were winning this series a while ago. I could probably pinpoint the time. Second period of Game 3. Would that be about the time, or could it have been a little bit earlier after they lost both games in Denver? Either way, I think many people were at peace with the idea that the Avalanche were not coming back to win this series. But it became about, are you going to get one? Are you going to just be able to say one night that you were better than Vegas? No, not one of them. And I'll keep driving home this point. It matters they were swept. It is a bigger deal that they were swept than if they lost in 5 or 6 or 7. And it creates even more urgency to diagnose what the issue is. Taking your thoughts at 719-247-1313. This one coming in from Scott and Florissant. Bednar is probably gone, but one graphic on TV summed it up for me. Period 1, 8 shots, not one closer than the faceoff dot. And to that second point, Scott, if you would have pulled up the shot chart from the second and third periods, you wouldn't even seen dots. There were no dots. There weren't shots above the faceoff dot, below the faceoff dot, behind the net, in front of the net, other side of the ice. They couldn't even it just got worse from there. So the first period, you're right. The first period was their best period. And it only got more difficult for the Avalanche to generate any shot opportunities as the game wore on. Same thing happened in Game 3. Where was the adjustment? Where was the upping of the collective game from the Colorado Avalanche? Again, that's blowing a 3-goal lead is stark, and it's something that will stick with you. But the second halves of both games 3 and 4, where they just they looked hapless, trying to even test Carter Hart. And that's one of the things. Thought the Avalanche got better as they were the best third period team in the league this year. They were the highest scoring team in the league. And they got what? Less than average, just under 2 goals a game in this series? Best third period team all season long. And they were hapless in the last 2 third periods. Heck, even game 2 was the third period even that great. And that's why I say, like, everything that we thought this Avalanche team was, what they possessed, it's all been turned upside down. It's all been turned on its head. Because maybe they're that against this team or that team and in the regular season or in the first 2 rounds, but when it really mattered, when they really needed it, they didn't have any of that. As far as Bednar probably being gone, this is where I say there's a thing I think should happen and a thing I predict will happen. I actually think he probably stays. And it's the same feeling I had with David Adelman. Not to equate the two, because if this is the end of Jared Bednar with the Colorado Avalanche, he deserves a ton of admiration and respect for what he has been. Okay, so he and David Adelman are leagues apart. They're not even in the same galaxy as coaches. But I'm saying the feeling I have right now with the Colorado Avalanche is the same feeling I had with the Denver Nuggets, that Josh Kroenke, or in this case, more accurately, Joe Sakic, with Josh Kroenke's permission, is not going to make a move. So I would say he probably stays. But when I look at this, and we talked about this a lot yesterday, when I look at this team and I try to figure out what this fatal flaw is, this is what I arrive at. This is a team that I truly believe is capable of winning a Stanley Cup. The talent that they have should be good enough to win another Stanley Cup. I think more than anything, this team needs the shock and needs the jolt that replacing a head coach brings. This is not about, for me, it's not about Jared Bednar. I've talked to many other people over the last couple of days that think that Jared Bednar is the problem. I don't know. I don't think that Jared Bednar is the problem. But changing the voice in the room might be the solution. And there's a difference between the two. I'm sure plenty of people think that Jared Bednar should be fired, because when I talk about the Avalanche getting worse as the game goes on, they'll say no adjustments were made. Jared Bednar didn't change it up, and therefore he should be held responsible, and he is the problem. I would say that Jared Bednar did a lot of moving of the chess pieces. I think he did a lot of stuff with the lineup. So I don't think that he's the issue. I think it's with this team. And not enough of them are elevating their play. And maybe you could take that as, Jared Bednar's not capable of motivating them. Maybe. But I don't want to criticize Jared Bednar too much, because I think he has done a great job. I just think we see it it's a real thing in sports. The jolt, the bump that you get when you fire your head coach. It's a sad reality of sports. I'm not saying it's my favorite thing about sports. I don't love that there is a position of importance that is looked at as disposable or looked at as, this variable that you could just change in and out and get the most out of your team. But there's evidence to back that up. Vegas is an example of this. Vegas, when they fired DeBoer, is an example of this. Edmonton, when they went from Jay Woodcroft to Chris Knobloch. And now they're hoping, I don't know if it's going the way they would like it to, because I think they wanted Bruce Cassidy, but we'll see if it works out for Edmonton this time around. And the quintessential example, because we still don't know that Vegas is going to win the Cup, Florida. It works, and it can work again if the Avalanche get the next hire right. And therein lies the difficulty. That's the crux of it all, and I grant you that. Who are you going to get that's better? That is a valid question, and I don't have a great answer for you right now, if I'm being 100% honest with you. But I think a new voice may spark this team to get further than they have the last few years. This from Tom. Avs had no sense of urgency until the last 2 minutes. The word I have to describe it is pitiful. The Avs don't need more talent. They need more dogs. Guys that can get punched in the face and won't fold. Guys that aren't soft and don't hang their heads when things don't go their way. The Avs had so much more talent, but talent alone doesn't win the Cup. And you could certainly, to your point, Tom, you could certainly see the frustration. Even Ray Ferraro talked about it, standing between the benches like he was during that game, could see the frustration building for the Colorado Avalanche. So maybe there was a point last night where the Avs, there was no way they were going to win. But they talked about their confidence being high going in. They felt like they were in a good place. And maybe they're lying to themselves, but like that George Costanza thing, it's not a lie if you believe it's true. I think the Avalanche felt like they were going to win last night. They were confident that they were going to win last night. And they weren't under any misconception about who Vegas was. 3 games in, they knew exactly what Vegas was going to try and do. But it didn't work. They couldn't figure him out. As for the dogs question, because that is a similar one to what we're asking about the Denver Nuggets. Do they have enough of those kind of players? Is Nazem Kadri not one of those players? Because I was led to believe that he was. I remember watching a Stanley Cup run in 2022 where if I were to describe Nazem Kadri, I would say dog. Josh Manson is another player. Nathan McKinnon's nickname is dog. Gabriel Landeskog. Can you question Gabriel Landeskog's toughness and his desire to win? But maybe they're not enough. To your point, Tom, maybe they aren't enough. And I look at Marty Necas and I look at Brock Nelson. And I say, has the Mikko Rantanen trade actually had the desired effect on this Colorado Avalanche team? Not saying it was ultimately the wrong move necessarily. We don't have to go that far, but has that trade made the Avalanche what they hoped to be. And when you look at the players who did not produce in this series, you would put those two near the top of the list. So maybe they do have some players like you're talking about, Tom. McKinnon, Manson, Kadri, Landeskog. I think Cale Makar has that in him. Maybe not as much as some of these other guys, but I think that they do have those players. Maybe they didn't have Valerian Nichushkin. Kind of thought he was a dog. I don't know anymore. Maybe they need more of them. They have some, they need more. Or to go back to the Jared Bednar conversation, do they have a coach that can challenge them to bring that out of them? Do they have those kind of players? But the message of bringing that out of them and playing that way, Jared Bednar is not capable of delivering, or it's not being heard. Again, we're talking about last night, and there's a lot to go through. Let's not forget that the season was probably over when they blew a 3-goal lead in period 2 of game 3. And I said the next day, that period may cost Jared Bednar his job. That is the example I hold up more than anything that happened last night of this team needs a spark. This team needs a jolt. This team may need a new voice. 719-24-7, 1313. Avs are the conversation. Join in, 719-24-7, 1313. Of course, the most important question coming out of last night's 2-1 loss as the Avs are swept out of the playoffs is, how's my state of mind? Well, I'm glad you asked me. It's not doing great. I have had for the entirety of this series a slew of Golden Knights fans in my mentions on Instagram responding to the video that I don't know who posted this on my Instagram and the Instagram of Extra Sports 1300, but they should be held responsible for this. Of me saying, I don't know how you beat this team in a 7-game series. Said that before the Vegas series started about the Colorado Avalanche. And I stand by it. At the time, I did not believe that there was a way that you could beat this team 4 out of 7 times. But Vegas Golden Knights fans, as is their right in a moment like this, are coming after me pretty good. In fact, one commenter asked, how is this guy doing today? And I responded back, not doing well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I did not get that one right. But in fair, like, there's strength in numbers, right? I can't be the only person that got this one wrong, right? Let's get to some of your texts from the 719. Hey, Kaufman, if the Avs sack Bednar, there will be teams lining up for his services with Edmonton right at the top of it. Stanley Cup or you're fired is not the way to win a Stanley Cup. But would you not agree that making a coaching change when the Oilers did, going to Chris Knobloch, did not get them an extra step? It didn't ultimately get them to where they want to go, which is hoisting the cup. But they got there. We're talking about the Avs not even getting there for a few years here. And it hasn't been Stanley Cup or fire the coach. It wasn't that way last year. I said that Jared Bednar would be on one of the hottest seats in the NHL. And I did not consider Bruce Cassidy, clearly. I didn't call for him to be fired last year. I didn't call for him to be fired the year before. I think many Avs fans are now at firing Jared Bednar. Last year was Stanley Cup or bust. The year before was Stanley Cup or bust. It's different because it's the accumulation of these disappointments culminating in a sweep, in a nothing you do is good enough to even win a game in this series. You have nothing to offer the Vegas Golden Knights in the way of resistance. That's why a lot of people are now on the Jared Bednar should be let go. It's time. He's been on the job for 10 years. Only John Cooper of the Tampa Bay Lightning has been on the job longer than Jared Bednar. And he has one cup to show for it. And over the last few years, this team has found a lot of really new and creative ways to get bounced from the playoffs. And I'm not even saying this is on Jared Bednar first and foremost. But other people might be arguing that. What I am saying is that this roster maybe do a jolt of energy. And the type of jolt of energy that comes with a changing at the top. But I understand, I said, well, first of all, he would get hired in 5 minutes is not a good reason to keep Jared Bednar. You can't have the fear of loss when you're making a decision like this. Whatever Jared Bednar goes on to do, you just wish him well, except when he goes up against your team. You have to assess whether it's the right call for your team right now to let him go. He could be exactly the right coach for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Although he's going to ask Bowman to do a lot of work with the back end of that roster, with that blue line. Jared Bednar is not going to be able, I don't think, to take the Edmonton Oilers with that goaltending and that blue line to the Stanley Cup final. So he's going to require a lot of changes on that team till it's one that he thinks he can win with. But the Avalanche have to make the decision independent of what may happen after. They just have to decide, has this guy's message grown stale? Is it falling on deaf ears? Is he not making the tactical adjustments necessary? Or is this a group, as much as it reflects poorly on the Avalanche players, are they not listening to him? You have to make that decision internally without thinking of how desired he would be across the league. And I've made this joke before, I'll make it again. You could always do what Vegas has done and make it so Jared Bednar can't interview for any jobs. So you don't have to. Can you have your cake and eat it too? Can you say, you're not the right guy for us anymore, but also you're not going anywhere? We're going to confine you to your home and you can't go and talk with other teams. There is always that route if Vegas has shown us nothing. And I think the one thing you could say about Vegas through all of this is that, maybe more people should be taking a cue from Vegas. I know that's a scary thought, and I'm certainly not advocating for teams to go the lengths that Vegas has gone, like, denying Bruce Cassidy the ability to talk with any other teams, or also what they were willing to let be bygones when it comes to their goaltender. More conversation after this. The conversation regarding the sudden collapse of the Colorado Avalanche continues. Appreciate you tuning in. Shouts to those of you watching the show anywhere you scroll. While you're there, a follow or a subscribe would be tremendous. But more importantly, drop in a comment. And we will display them proudly and prominently on the live stream. Before we get to your thoughts this hour, let's hear from the Colorado Avalanche after the 2-1 loss that ended their season in a 4-game sweep. I think Jared Bednar, more than anybody, summed it up quite nicely.
Yeah, losing sucks, and losing 4 straight is worse, and losing, I think the further you go, the worse it gets.
And that's why, there's a old adage, I don't know if anybody who made this up. Somebody had to be the first one to say it, but it's a universal truth of sports, I think. It's not necessarily that you lose, because we can all acknowledge that at the end of every season, only one team has accomplished the goal they set out to achieve, right? There's only one team that is truly happy at the end of the year. So it's not so much that the Avs or the Denver Nuggets or the Denver Broncos lost. It's always about how you lose. The Denver Broncos lost because, in large part, Sean Payton did not take the points when they were readily available to him. Just one of a few reasons, right? Wasn't just that the Denver Nuggets lost. It's that they lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves again. And it's the fact that they lost when, and where does this sound familiar after last night? We believed that they lacked a bit of heart, or at least did not desire to win as much as Minnesota did. So it's not that the Avalanche lost and did not win the Stanley Cup. Yes, that is a disappointing thing. That sucks, to use Jared Bednar's word. But it's the fact that they lost to a team that it's still fresh in our minds, beat the Colorado Avalanche a few years ago. It's a team that you reasonably expect to always be around at the end. And if the Avs can't get through this team, that's a problem. But it's that they were swept. That how the Avs lost, that is most important, is that they lost by getting swept. 3-goal lead in game 3, they lost. Led for the vast majority of game 2, lost. And only had one goal that they needed to score to make it a brand new game, and could not until Vegas got an insurance goal to make it 2-0 before Gabriel Landeskog ultimately scored a cosmetic goal at the end. It's the fact they got swept. It's the fact that we didn't get to the end of any one of these 4 games and say the Avalanche figured this out or figured that out, or they can build on this or they can build on that. There was none of that. Every night, the Avs were on the losing end, and it seemed like there wasn't much to go on, not much to build on. Oh, if they just do this or just do that. It felt like anything that the Avs did well in this series, by the time the game ended, was counteracted and negated by Vegas. It's not that you lose, it's how you lose. That matters. That costs people jobs. That makes you wonder about the long-term viability as contenders for a team. Because we have to have the window question, the window conversation, closed, open, closing. You have to wonder that with the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I think it's more open than the Nuggets window is, but it's not going to stay open forever, which creates the urgency this offseason to, again, figure out what this fatal flaw is. The fatal flaw that had you losing to Seattle, followed by back-to-back playoff losses to Dallas, and now has you getting swept by Vegas. There is something inherently wrong with this team. It may be only one thing because there's a lot of good with this team, right? But they got to find out what that is. Because if they don't, this is just run it back, then I don't expect next year to be any different. Whether it's Vegas or whether it's someone else they run up against. In the Stanley Cup final, in the Western Conference final, in the first round. It's not about matchups anymore with this team, I don't think. It's about something that is inherently wrong with them that needs to be figured out. Gabriel Landeskog was asked last night about the frustration level of not being able to get to your game, right? Kind of speaking to the emotion of the Avalanche had nothing to offer Vegas because every night they ended up on the losing end. Landeskog bristled at that notion.
I'm not going to stand here and argue it, but I think you look back at the 4 games, there are definitely times where we found our game. I think the problem was we found ways to lose hockey games. You know, I think the course of the regular season in the first 2 rounds, it was the opposite. Even if we didn't have our A game, we were finding different ways to win hockey games. And, you know, against this good of a hockey team in the Golden Knights, it's they'll make you pay for your mistakes. So at times it was really good. At times I thought we deserved better, but they're a good hockey team. They're desperate and played hard.
Few things there that Gabriel Landeskog opens up for discussion. He is correct. First period of game 1, first period of game 3, excuse me, all around, very good. Big saves from Scott Wedgwood, 3 goals on the board. Yeah, they found their game. Now, I would say, armed with the knowledge of 4 games now, whether that was as much Vegas letting their foot off the gas, having already won 2 games in Denver, but yes, the first period of game 3 was the best period the Avs had, and they were the much better team than Vegas. Game 2, right? They get the early goal. They're leading. The second period, I thought that they all but shut down Vegas. But again, here comes the third period. Vegas finds a way. Colorado does not. So I agree with his premise that there were times in this series where the Avalanche, you're like, oh, that's the Avs team that I expected, but not enough. And not even enough to win a game. There wasn't even an entire game that you could say that about the Colorado Avalanche. It was fits and spurts. It was a period here, a period there. So, okay, you found your game in the first 2 periods of game 2 and the first period of game 3. How'd that turn out? I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't going to be received well by the fan base. There's another thing Cale Makar said that is going to I think maybe drive a couple of you up the wall. I'll play that momentarily. But sticking with what Gabriel Landeskog said, I started the show today by saying the way in which the Avalanche were dispatched in this series makes you question everything you believed about this hockey team. Because all the things that they had done through 82 games of the regular season, 9 games of the playoffs, completely went away. The third period, they owned the third period throughout the season. I don't think they were the better team in one third period in this series. They were the team, to Gabriel Landeskog's point, that always found a way. Even without their aid game, they were able to find ways to win. They weren't able to do that. And Vegas has something to say. Vegas took them off their game. And that's what's going to happen when you get to this stage of the playoffs, is that you're going to play a very good team that is capable at times of taking you out of your game. But the Avalanche couldn't win a single game without playing at the highest level that they are capable of playing at, and they never reached that level. The conversation about, the point he made about Vegas pouncing on the mistakes. We talked about Dallas pouncing on Avalanche mistakes last year. I remember every mistake that Colorado made against Dallas seemed to end up in the back of their net, including when the mistake of going into the penalty box. Right? So that was Dallas. New year, you don't play, you get new opponents. It's not a Dallas problem. Well, now it's a Vegas problem. So now that's 2 teams that are able to pounce on your every mistake. So is that a matchup problem, or is that a problem with the Colorado Avalanche when they're met with the pressure and the resistance that the playoffs bring? And why are they making so many mistakes? And then at the very end, and I know he didn't mean it this way, but given some of the conversation, when he talks about at the end, Vegas being hungry or desperate and playing hard, you leave open the possibility that maybe you weren't that way. Why was that? Why weren't you hungry? Why weren't you desperate? And again, I don't think Gabriel Landeskog meant it that way, but certainly it could lead some people to make the conclusion of, well, if Vegas was this, that, and the other, then maybe Colorado wasn't this, that, and the other. Here's the thing from Cale Makar that I think, again, innocent enough, maybe factually correct, but nobody wants to hear it after a series like that.
I mean, analytically, you feel like you dominate games at certain points. You have a lot of ozone chances, a lot of ozone play. I mean, they lock it down well, but you think at some point it's going to break through, and we just weren't able to break through that door at some point.
The last thing anyone wants to hear today is that analytically, the Colorado Avalanche were better than the Vegas Golden Knights. And I know that for a fact because the same discourse happened one day ago in reaction to Kenny Atkinson, the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, in their series where they were coincidentally also swept, that they were besting New York analytically in a lot of different areas. Analytically, maybe you were beating the Vegas Golden Knights. Maybe you should be up 3-1 right now, or the series should be tied 2-2 analytically. Well, guess what? The eyeball test says you were dominated. The result says you were dominated. So maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. But to throw out analytics, well, we had this, that, the other. I like the stat, and stats are analytics too, the stat that Scott threw out. First period, 8 shots, not a single one of them below the faceoff dot. That's not a good stat. That's not being analytically good. You got to get to the net front. So Cale Makar can look at certain analytics and I can look at other analytics and say that Vegas was analytically better than you in this regard. And it's the entire problem with analytics and advanced numbers. And really, advanced numbers is what we're talking about here. Expected goals, saves above expected, all of those kind of things, which I value and I think help paint the picture. But the problem with these things is that they are over a long period of time. Most of the time, that it's these analytics. The reason why front offices and teams buy into them so much, and there's a reason why baseball, having the longest season of anybody, really buys into these things, because over the course of a long period of time, if you're good at this, that, and the other, analytically, you're going to win a lot of games. Well, the Avalanche did. Right? They did win a lot of games. They won the most games. I think maybe by the end of, if I'm doing the math right, especially maybe not if Carolina, but if Vegas ends up winning the Stanley Cup, then I think the Avalanche finished between the regular season and the playoffs the most wins of any NHL team. So the analytics over a long period of time proved out Avalanche very good. This is a shorter amount of time. This is 4 games. This is 1 game. And again, what matters more here is the fact that the Avalanche couldn't even find a way to win 1 game of this series. But analytics for a lot of people is a dirty word, but you really don't want to hear it after you were swept or your team was swept, and you don't want to hear it when your eyes are telling you that Vegas was the much better team, that they stifled Colorado. You want to hear expected goal. And look, saves above expected, analytics, Carter Hart, pretty good, especially in game 1. So again, there were some analytics where Vegas was better than Colorado in. But I get what Cale Makar is saying. And I understand the feeling that the Avalanche had in their dressing room last night. They felt that they were close. But in the end, they felt like they were close in game 1, in game 2, in game 3, and even last night in game 4. But the problem is you add up all of those 4, and it says Vegas 4, you 0. Maybe you were close in each one of these games, but in the end, you weren't that close. You got swept. So what do the Avs do about it? What can they do about it? Your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Avalanche swept by the Golden Knights. 2-1 was the final last night. Taking your reactions and where the Avalanche go from here. I mentioned earlier, if you're watching the live stream of the show, you can comment right there on your social media platform of choice, and I can do what I'm doing with Scott's comment right here. Scott on Facebook says Bednar getting fired would be similar to Tennessee firing Philip Fulmer. Not the biggest college football guy. I'm guessing it has not worked out for the fine folks of Knoxville the way they hoped. That's what I'm guessing. That's what you're implying here. I'm inferring that you're implying that they had somebody who they knew could win them games and get them to where they needed to go, and they said, we can find somebody better, or we need to move on, time for a change, and they haven't got back since. It's a risk, and it's not something that should be taken lightly, just firing Jared Bednar. Firing David Adelman would be easy. Take that lightly. Just do it. Denver Nuggets. Firing Michael Malone, don't take that lightly. Firing Jared Bednar, don't take it lightly. And look, to Scott's point, and to many of your points, and we'll get back to more of them momentarily, there isn't a guarantee that will work. Right? Did what the Denver Nuggets did ultimately work? Does it seem like it's working? No. But I look at this team, I look at the way they're constructed, I look at the talent that they have, and yes, I'm not saying, bring the entire roster back and then just fire Jared Bednar. I'm not saying that Jared Bednar is the only variable that needs to be changed here. Same thing with the Denver Nuggets. I didn't just say, let go of David Adelman and everything will be fine. No, I'm saying you need to let go of David Adelman and you need to trade Jamal Murray because he's maybe the only player that's going to bring you a return that you can actually use to reshape your team. I don't know that the Avalanche need to be reshaped necessarily. Like they need to, send half their team out. But I think it's I think it's both. But what's the first thing? What's the thing that the Avalanche need the most? And it's not about, to me, it's not about necessarily finding somebody on the street. Although, could you argue? I don't know if Vegas is ever going to let Bruce Cassidy interview for another job, but Bruce Cassidy's won a Stanley Cup. I don't have their resumes in front of me, but could you argue that Bruce Cassidy is at least on the same level as Jared Bednar? I don't know if he's the style of coach. In an ideal world, the Colorado Avalanche would hire John Tortorella. And who knows, if Vegas ends up getting swept in the Stanley Cup final, Vegas may say, you know what, John, we're going to go in a different direction. It's Vegas. Who knows what they're going to do and how they're going to react to any level of disappointment. But the type of coach, I think Torts might be the type of coach that the Colorado Avalanche need. I don't know how an abundant supply they are. But I'll say this regarding Jared Bednar. If they're not going to make the change, okay, if that's what Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic decide, they got to do a lot better job convincing me than Josh Kroenke did in bringing back David Adelman. I'll say that much. If there is a reason and an alternative to say we don't need to fire the coach because we're going to do this, I need to hear that. And they got to do a little bit better job convincing than the brain trust with the Denver Nuggets did. I was not filled with any level of confidence that the Denver Nuggets are going to do anything they need to do to get better next year. That's how I came away with. Now, the one thing I will say for the Colorado Avalanche is that usually, without hardly any exceptions, I am more satisfied with what the Colorado Avalanche do and say than I am the Denver Nuggets. So maybe there is a reason, and maybe they can clearly state that, and I will sit here the day after it or the day of that on this show and go, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Because I'm not 100% sold that Jared Bednar, Jared Bednar is first on the list of those to blame. I'm merely talking about the effect that we've seen with Vegas and twice now in Florida and say it happens in sports. It's worked. That new coach bump, that new coach jolt, it has been proven to work. Not in every case, but it has been proven to work. And I think that's what the Avalanche need more than anything. It's not really as anti-Jared Bednar a take as it may come across as. This coming in from Chris says, long-suffering Sabres fan here. Time for a new coach for the Avs. Got to shake up the roster and find a top-tier goalie. The goalie thing is interesting. I do want to get into that coming up. So you bring up a good question or good comment, Chris. Are we sure that the goalie that they need isn't already on their roster? We got to get into the Mackenzie Blackwood of it all coming up. But to your point, it's not just we're going to do one thing and call it good. No, you got swept. Like there are at least two things that you should probably do in order to put yourself in a better position next year. Let's at least do two things, if not more. But you're right. But how do you shake up the roster? Because unlike with the Denver Nuggets, because of Aaron Gordon's inability to be healthy the last couple of years, and it's not even anti-Jamal Murray. It's just that who are you going to trade that's going to bring you what you need unless you're going to trade Nikola Jokic. So that's why I make the case that the Nuggets should look at trading Jamal Murray. With the Colorado Avalanche, I don't think I want the Avalanche to trade McKinnon, Landeskog, or Makar. Even if it were to get them what they may need from a roster standpoint. I don't want to lose any of those three guys. I'm not willing to lose any of those three guys. Ask me if I'm willing to lose Marty Necas. Ask me if I'm willing for the Avs to lose Brock Nelson. Now we have a different conversation. Ask me if I'm willing to lose Valeri Nichushkin. But Cale, McKinnon, and Landeskog, nope. Can you truly shake up the roster if you leave those three players untouched? I think you can. And I think you look at the middle six of your team, because I really like the fourth line. You know, I know they didn't produce in this series either, but really no one did. I guess Mackenzie Blackwood is the only guy coming out of this series smelling like a rose, because the one time he was called upon, he played well. Not everybody else on that roster could say that, but I don't want to lose Kale or McKinnon or Landeskog. I don't want to mess with that fourth line. And they got to try to bring back Drury because he's a restricted free agent. But the middle six, and I guess Natchez is a top 3 guy. But Natchez, Nelson, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, Kadri, Waugh, Colton. Not saying all of them need to be gone. All I'm saying is that's the group that I think you're trying, if you're Chris McFarland, that you're looking at and saying, what can I do with these guys? This coming in from Aaron. Such a strange series. Before Vegas, we were looking at an all-time team, best offense, best defense, top-tier goaltending. They were dismantled by Vegas. I love Bednar, but Mark Crawford was fired for not getting a second cup with a very talented roster. That's probably time for another voice. And that is a phenomenal, that is the perfect, Aaron, good job by you. If I had some sort of a leaderboard on comments today, you would be near the top of it. What did going from Mark Crawford to Bob Hartley do? So I've been pointing out recent examples in the NHL for other teams, Vegas, Florida. Aaron's bringing up Avs history. History that Joe Sakic knows better than anybody. Phenomenal point. Also, the Avs look exhausted. Vegas has succeeded by getting players like Stone and others back at the end of their season. I can't help but thinking that staying healthy all season long and 8 players playing significant time in the Olympics took a toll. Maybe some load management. We don't say those words in the NHL. We don't do that. That's not part of hockey culture. I don't know. Didn't Marner play in the Olympics? Didn't Eichel? I'm not saying it didn't factor in, and but I do think the point that you bring up is another very good one, because part of what we have seen over the last week is the intersection of a team on the rise and a team on the fall, either because of health, and we're gonna get a laundry list of maladies for this Avalanche team. You are going to hear somebody will have played with a broken something. There will be a torn this and a torn that. But I promise you, wait about a week or two, and Vegas is going to have a list of their own. But to your point about Mark Stone, right? They're getting back Mark Stone. I guess at the same time, technically, that the Avs got back Cale Makar, but Mark Stone had been on the shelf for how long? And was certainly fresher than Cale Makar was when he returned. That is part of it too. And if you are someone who says that sweeping changes don't need to be made, that Jared Bednar should stay, then I think the best argument you can make is the health of Cale Makar. I'm not saying that you'll convince me by making that argument, but I think your most convincing argument is the realization this series that the most important player, right, the proverbial gun to your head, next expansion draft, you can only protect one Avs player. One. Who are you protecting? It's number 8. That was made abundantly clear. I don't want to lose McKinnon or Landeskog either. I think they are both integral to what the Avalanche want to do. But the most valuable, the most important player, the guy that everything the Avs do is made possible by, is Cale Makar. And he missed 2 games, and he was limited in game 3. If you want to make the argument that a healthy Cale Makar is going to make a world of difference, I will listen. But then I will immediately bring back the fact that Vegas beat the Avs in 4. They beat the Avs with Cale Makar looking better than he did in game 3. And even he said he was 100% last night. Maybe lip service, maybe not. We'll see when the final injury report comes out. But Vegas beat them last night too. So game 1 and game 2, okay. I mean, you were still leading in game 2. Like you were winning. Game 3, you gone back. Okay, he's limited. You're up 3-0. So I would respectfully disagree with that line of thinking that simply a healthy Cale Makar would have made all the difference. Maybe we're not talking about a sweep, but we're not talking about the Avalanche beating the Vegas Golden Knights. At the very least, that courtesy has to be extended to Vegas. And it's not anybody's fault, despite what, all the Vegas fans in my mentions will say. They didn't even know Vegas was going to be this good. Come on, nobody thought that Vegas was going to be this good, and I think you could count on one hand the number of people that took Vegas to even beat Colorado in this series, let alone sweep them. So if you want to say this series wouldn't have ended in a sweep if Cale Makar would have been 100% healthy, okay. Do they still win the series? I don't think so. And a lot of what we're talking about today is, yes, because they got swept, but the bigger picture is it's another playoff in which the Avalanche are overmatched, when we thought going into it that they were this wagon that was almost unbeatable. 719-24-7-1313. Got to take a break. Back after this. Saw a report from Elliot Friedman, or not necessarily a report, just Elliot Friedman, hockey insider for TSN, saying that Cale Makar's injury might be even worse than people think. And it might be so bad that his status for the beginning of the next season is in jeopardy. And I would be interested to see if that ultimately is the case. Jared Bednar was asked about the state of the health of his team and would not go into detail, saying that's more Chris McFarland's role, but we'll see. But again, the question I ask, as much as Cale Makar is the most valuable member of the Colorado Avalanche, was this team not supposed to be maybe the deepest team in the NHL? Did this team not have a 3-0 lead despite Cale Makar's injury and squander it? Like, Cale Makar and his injury might be an answer to many of the questions we are asking today. He's not the answer to all of them. The collapse in period 2 of game 3 is not, the answer is not Cale Makar was hurt. They scored 3 goals. They were up 3-0. That's not the answer to that question. And while Cale Makar may be the most valuable member of the Colorado Avalanche, he does not impact every single player up and down the roster. There were times where Cale Makar was on the bench. And I said this after game 3, not one guy stepped up in the wake of Cale Makar's injury. Not one. That's kind of hard to figure. I mean, Cale Makar is great, and I wanted to acknowledge Cale Makar's impact on the team, but not one guy. We didn't come away from any of the 3 games before last night going, at least that guy stepped up his game. Not a single player. So either Vegas is that much better than Colorado, or there are some other issues with this Avalanche team beyond Cale Makar's injury. Albert said, this is a long one. Let's see if I can. Bednar may not be totally responsible for all of the collapse, but he is one piece that can easily be changed to produce a better outcome in the playoffs. Which is the point I am making. Yes, it's easier to fire the coach than fire the players. But also, despite that fact and how unfair it might be, there are thousands of people lined up to try and get NHL jobs or head coaching jobs. Right? So it's not deterring anybody from making this their vocation. So, yes, you feel bad, but at the same time, it's like if it was such a detriment to the coaching community, then people wouldn't want to be coaches. It's kind of part of the deal. That your time may come where you need to be fired. You may be thrown under the bus. You may be the sacrificial lamb. You may be scapegoated for the betterment of the team. That might actually be a clause in every coaching contract. You may be scapegoated, and we may fire you for it. Albert continues. Someone needs to pay the price for this unprecedented series humiliation. New tactics, different motivational sparks, and a new voice could make the difference. The team needs grit and grimy muckers. This team needs a goalie that can steal games in the playoffs that the team trusts. More on that coming up. The right new coach could possibly get what the team needs out of the current roster. I could not agree with you more. This is all in theory. You have to trust the organization to be able to find the right guy. But to say he doesn't exist, I think is just as wrong as saying that firing Jared Bednar will automatically fix the Colorado Avalanche. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't think you can say on the other side of the argument that there's no way that the Avalanche can't get, and this isn't about better, this isn't about more accomplished. This is about the right coach. Is Jared Bednar the right coach right now for the Colorado Avalanche? And if not, is there a coach that could be the right coach? Not better, right. The time, the moment that the Colorado Avalanche are in right now. Is there a coach that is the right one for right now? He could be out there. But the first step is the Avalanche assessing themselves and deciding whether they are willing to take that step. Because one thing that has happened to the Oilers that you need to keep in mind, do not allow it to be leaked out that you're looking at a different coach when your other coach is still employed. It's a mistake. You should decide whether you're moving on from your head coach, and maybe that's what the Oilers were content to do. It seems to me like they wanted to pull the old switcheroo and get Chris Knobloch out and bring in Bruce Cassidy, and they didn't really want to open up a full-scale search. But I think the right order of operation is to go, all right, how much is Jared Bednar responsible for what has happened? Is he capable of fixing it? Because one microcosm of the argument that the Avalanche haven't gotten better necessarily from one year to the next, they did fire Ray Bennett. Why did they fire Ray Bennett? Because the power play sucked. Fast forward 1 year later, what are we saying at the end of this series? The power play sucks. So is Dave Haxtell going to get fired now in order to fix that? Or maybe the head coach is the one that needs to be replaced in order to elevate that very crucial part of any team's game. 719-247-1313. The three stories that are driving the show coming up next. You're listening to 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in. Appreciate you joining me, whether it's on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, or you are watching the show anywhere you may scroll. If you'd like to take your participation in today's program a step further, you can communicate via a number of different ways. You could text or call into the show at 719-247-1313, or if you're watching the live stream, you can comment on your social media platform of choice. Perhaps these three stories that are driving the show today will spark some interest in communicating. All right, we start. I mean, these are all Avs related, just to tell you right off the top. But let's talk about the game itself first for story number one.
Now Hurdle has it back towards the cage. Deflected wide, sticks on to Mackenzie Blackwood. 5:50 to go in the third period of game 4. Tipped, they score. Goldsmith's first of the playoffs. And barring a bigger miracle than we already needed, that should just about do it.
Connor McGahey on the call for Altitude Sports, as heard on Extra Sports 1300. The Avs would get a cosmetic goal with 2 minutes left, courtesy of Gabriel Landeskog, but it was a wrap for the Colorado Avalanche as they are swept out of the Western Conference Final by the Vegas Golden Knights. 2-1 was the final score. And in that goal right there speaks to one of the major issues that face the Colorado Avalanche in this series, among many. Nobody on the same level as some of the players that Vegas got to score goals scored for the Avs. I think one of the most shocking things about this series is that the depth scoring was almost exclusively on the Vegas side. Guys you had never heard of, guys that haven't scored in the NHL in 4 years, guys that had not scored at any point in these playoffs. Those were the type of guys that score goals. In many ways, it wasn't Mitch Marner or Jack Eichel that undid the Colorado Avalanche. It was Brett Howden and guys that are in the third D pair, in the third and fourth line, the thing that the Avalanche had been getting all season long and got to an NHL record level in the last series. 16 different goal scorers. How many different goal scorers did the Avs have in this series? I think you could count them on one hand. That was one of the many things that were flipped by the Vegas Golden Knights. But the Avalanche, and it wasn't even, per goal scoring. That was the issue. Like, they couldn't even get shots off. Like, tell me the number of players who got a shot on goal the last couple of games against Carter Hart. That number is very small. Like, how are you supposed to get the depth? Part of getting the depth scoring is when everything is working, that's when you get the depth scoring. Right? More often than not. The Avs had nothing going offensively when it mattered the most. The second, we could talk about the period 2 collapse in game 3. But the very next thing that I'm going to remember from this series is the fact for the second half of game 3 and the second half of game 4, the Avalanche couldn't even get a shot off against Carter Hart, let alone beat him for a goal, let alone somebody on their third or fourth line or third D pairing score a goal. Like the Avalanche couldn't even, it seemed like for so much of this series, they couldn't even get out of first gear. They couldn't even get the things that we expect. Well, certainly they'll get production from Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar and Gabriel Landeskog. I mean, that's the given. And then, yeah, they'll probably get some production out of some of their depth guys, and then they'll get production out of all their depth guys. They can get anything. So it's actually kind of hard for me to lament the fact that the Avalanche got no depth scoring because they didn't get any primary scoring. They didn't get any shots off against this Las Vegas team. After game 1, I said, I want the Avalanche to test Carter Hart like they did in game 1 and see if this guy holds up. And the Avalanche said, no, it's okay, we're good. Will actually make his life easier as the series progresses. But that game 4 last night, right in line with the rest of them, wasn't it? Same issues from the Colorado Avalanche that plagued them in the first 3 games of the series happened in the 4th. They never got anything back from what they were for 82 games in the first 2 series of these playoffs. And getting swept, not even being able to say, well, we got one. Remember that one because we did this, that, and the other. They didn't have that. That's why it's so stark and it's so abrupt and surprising and shocking and disappointing and all of these other adjectives, is because the Avalanche, in the end, weren't that competitive with Las Vegas. In stretches, at times, in fits and spurts. Not consistently enough to win a single game. The Avalanche just never found it against the Vegas Golden Knights. And story number 2 is how do they get it back? Here's Jared Bednar.
Yeah, I don't know. Takes a little bit of time to do that, I think. I can't really answer that right now, but I think that takes a little bit of time, a little reflection. Yeah.
That's Jared Bednar when asked how a team that won the President's Trophy, scored the most goals in the league, gave up the fewest, ran roughshod through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, getting scoring from every possible direction they could. Why all of that went away at the snap of a finger. All of this that the Colorado Avalanche accomplished this season, and they're done in 4. How does something like that happen? And I do not play that clip to say, see, Jared Bednar doesn't know. Now, he may not, but I will grant him the time to kind of ponder. It is right after the game. And as unsatisfying as that answer might be, maybe he needs some time. Give him the time. Give the Avalanche organization the time, and they can come back with some answers. What does this team need? Because this isn't a Dallas problem anymore. This isn't about being a bad matchup because now we have multiple bad matchups. If it's just, Vegas and Dallas, that's too many teams that are bad matchups. Well, what about Seattle? Was that a bad matchup? Like, it's 3 different teams now that they've bowed out against in these playoffs. There is a fatal flaw within this team somewhere. And they have to find what that is. Because this team was supposed to be way better built than the one in 2021 that lost to Vegas. They were supposed to have everything they needed in order to be successful in the playoffs, to be ultimately successful. But you're questioning how real any of that was if they're going to bow out this way in 4 games. So they have to find what that fatal flaw is. They have to find a way, and I use the word spark, to spark this team. And I still contend, and I said this after game 3 with the collapse in the second period, and I'll say it again last night because there certainly wasn't anything to change my mind on display from the Colorado Avalanche. I think they have to seriously consider replacing Jared Bednar. If for no other reason than this team needs a jolt, this team needs a proverbial slap in the face to say, get it together. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what they need. Maybe they don't need an overhaul of the roster. Maybe they do indeed have everything they need in order to win a Stanley Cup. But how's it going to get through to them? Optimistically, you say losing in this way would. Okay, well, it didn't after the way they lost to Dallas last year, and it didn't after they lost to Dallas the year before. And that's part of it, too, with Jared Bednar, is we're a few years down the road here. I don't think a lot of reasonable people were calling for Jared Bednar's job when they lost to Seattle. For me, it keeps happening. 4 years in a row now, this has happened, and it's been different teams that they've faced. They've made moves. Heaven knows they've made moves. It's not like they've sat idly by just hoping for the best. Jared Bednar's been on the job for 10 years. He's the second longest tenured coach in the NHL. He has 1 Stanley Cup. And he'll forever be credited with that Stanley Cup. But there's something to be said for Jared Bednar maybe being the right guy in 2022, but maybe not the right guy in 2027. But whatever it is, Avalanche got to figure it out. Because I just don't think that running it back is going to make you expect a different result. And what's crazy is you're going to hang on to that, as you should, for 82 games. Like, we're at a point where if I talk about how they're leading the league in goals or they got the best record, you're going to go, yeah, so what about the playoffs? Like, we're to that point. You thought it was already Stanley Cup or bust. Now it's like nothing even matters until, like, you can't even take enjoyment out of a great season next year. If this is the same team and they do the same thing again, you're going to look at it and go, okay, I saw this before. I didn't like how this movie ended. Something has to change. Is it a small thing? Is it a big thing? Is it multiple things? I start by looking at the head coach. And then I work my way out from there. We'll see if the Colorado Avalanche agree with me. Now, can't all be doom and gloom, right? There was a positive from an individual standpoint last night. Here's story number 3.
It's freaking hard to not play for so long and come into a big game, but I just said gonna go play as best I can and give them the best chance I can to win and just battle.
It doesn't make a lick of difference now. And the fact of the matter is the Avalanche still lost. But I think one thing that you go into next year absolutely saying that's your number one goalie. Unquestioned. You got to ride with Mackenzie Blackwood. That's why he was brought in. That was the vision they had for him. And look, things got changed along the way. Right? Mackenzie Blackwood wasn't really looking like that. He was outplayed by Scott Wedgwood. I don't think Jared Bednar made a goalie change too late. I really don't. I think he made the right decisions along the way here with his goaltenders. But that all needs to be gone now. Because you were reminded last night of why Mackenzie Blackwood is in a Colorado Avalanche sweater in the first place. And given that I just said that we're not going to, I shouldn't say we don't care about the regular season, but understanding that the value of the regular season for the Colorado Avalanche is as low as it has been in many years. I think you ride through whatever ups and downs Mackenzie Blackwood is going to bring you next year. And you finally just say, you're our guy for better or worse. If it costs us a couple of points in the standings, if it costs us the division, then so be it, because this guy has a higher ceiling than Scott Wedgwood. And we just saw on the other end of the ice what a goaltender with a little bit higher ceiling can do for you. Carter Hart's made a world of difference with the Avalanche. Everything you have seen during the season says that Scott Wedgwood should have been the number one guy. But now you just got to say, regardless of that, Mackenzie Blackwood is the guy now. I don't think that can be the only thing, but I think that's obvious, right? This is obvious. It has to be Mackenzie Blackwood's net next year. You got him on a long-term deal. You don't have Scott Wedgwood on a long-term deal. And you've seen that maybe Mackenzie Blackwood hasn't been better than Scott Wedgwood, all told. But some of the saves he made last night, you understand. And you just got to invest in, because here's the thing. If the Avs don't win the division next year, like this, part of what this season was, oh, goody, they avoid Dallas. They avoid playing in the round of death, where the matchup of death where you have to play Minnesota or Dallas. They avoided that. That was a goal of this season. Some good that did. You got to invest in Mackenzie Blackwood, and you got to see if he realizes his potential. Winning President's trophies in divisions now, the way this season ended, are not nearly as important as we thought they were. It was important based on the way last year ended, or the year before that, too. Right? They got to get out of that matchup. So Scott Wedgwood is the better guy, and it worked. But it didn't work when they needed it to. So that's one thing I can say, and I think we all agree on. We may disagree on Jared Bednar and how close the Avs are and all that kind of stuff. I think we can all agree, watching last night, that next year is Mackenzie Blackwood's time. What that means for Scott Wedgwood, that's another question. That's the number one goaltender for the Colorado Avalanche, starting next year and all the way through. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Gabriel Landeskog has to be one of the players that you feel the worst for, right? Works his way back nearly 3 years to get back to play for the Colorado Avalanche to win a Stanley Cup, and he's a round away and gets swept out. And look, he's one of the guys that didn't elevate their game to the level it needed to be in order to win either. But you just think about Gabriel Landeskog and why he's back with the Colorado Avalanche. And just like, man, you hate it for him more than anybody else. And we'll go through the season that was as we move, through the coming days. But that was a positive overall this season, was Gabriel Landeskog fully returned to the Avalanche and the impact that he made. One thing that I keep going back to, thinking about this series and the way it went, any thought that, maybe the Avs are built wrong. The style of hockey that Vegas wanted to play, the type of game that Vegas wanted to play. We just got done saying, or I just got done saying, for 2 rounds that the Avalanche are okay playing that way. It was actually a big source of pride for the Colorado Avalanche to be able to win the way that the Kings wanted to win despite playing the way Minnesota wanted to play. The whole idea was the way that Vegas plays, the Avs are perfectly fine playing that way. And sure, there's an argument to say maybe Vegas is a little bit, that old Bane line from Dark Knight Rises, you merely adopted the dark, I was born in it. Like, maybe Vegas is fundamentally built that way. That's the way they want to play, the way they want to do it, and that's not necessarily the way that the Avs would prefer to play. But is that enough to go from 8 wins in 9 games to getting swept? It's one of the questions you got to ask. Is there a chance here that Vegas is just that much better than Colorado? That's one of, as valid a question as that is, it's one that I have a very difficult time believing. I have a very difficult time believing Vegas is that much better equipped to win in the playoffs, and they're that much more talented, and they're that much better of a team. But man, a 4-0 result and the Avs not being able to do anything against this team when the game was on the line sure makes you wonder. But they were supposed to be built for this. They were supposed to have what they needed. They were supposed to be comfortable playing this way. I mean, this series just completely makes you question everything that you believed about this team. I believe they call that an existential crisis. But that's what that result brings on. Is you're like, what was even real with this team? Vegas just looks so much better. And Colorado looks so overmatched. So if it is the roster, not Jared Bednar, let's put him to the side for a moment. Right? Even John Tortorella last night told us to get off of Jared Bednar's ass. So, okay, let's do that for a minute. Where are you going to start? Where are you going to start with this roster? It's the same thing that the Nuggets are facing. Like, we know that they are not optimized as a roster. right? In this Western Conference with San Antonio and OKC and Minnesota, they're not built right. Okay, well, what are you going to do? You're going to trade Jonas Valanciunas and get the help that you need? Probably not. That's why I keep bringing up Jamal Murray. Not that I want to see Jamal Murray go, but he would have enough trade value, having just been named to the All-NBA third team the other day, to get you somewhat significant pieces in return to try and remake your team. Applying that to the Colorado Avalanche. You going to move out Nick Blankenberg and get the help that you need? Nope, you're not. But two players that I think you have to look at here, if we're just looking at the roster. Said this earlier. Marty Necas and Brock Nelson. Were they ultimately the right fits? Regular season would say abso-freaking-lutely. This series would say abso-freaking-not. Abso-freaking-lutely not. There we go. You know, I was just curious. It's been a while. Marty Necas ended up doubling up Mikko Rantanen's production in these playoffs. Fair play to him. He also played twice as many games, and Mikko Rantanen was playing the 6 that he played with the torn MCL. We've seen Mikko Rantanen be built for the postseason, right? 2022. And I'm just asking the question. I mean, there was a lot of good that Marty Necas did. And there was a lot of good that Brock Nelson did. Did they simply just pick the worst possible time to fade away? I mean, can we just say that about the entire Avalanche team and believe that they're not going to fade away next year? Like, even Brock Nelson, early in this series, he wasn't getting shots on target, right? He was open for shots. He was just missing. Last night, I would say his opportunities were on target, but they looked to me like pretty easy saves for Carter Hart. It seemed like he was fooling Carter Hart on either of his 2 big shot opportunities in that game. And then Marty Necas did a fine job setting up other players. The problem was there wasn't anybody to set up as that series went on, and he didn't produce scoring goals himself. I mean, it's a natural place to look, right? Or is it just, I mean, you still got to figure out what you're willing to give up to get these kind of guys, but is it addressing, the top 6? Or is it just getting a bunch more middle 6 guys? They got Nick Waugh and they got Nazem Kadri, neither of which were very productive in this series, but a lot of that's going around lately. Do you just say we need more of those guys? The reason why we brought in Kadri and the reason we brought in Nick Waugh, that still stands. We still believe those kind of guys can help us win in the playoffs, so we need to get more of those guys. Now, who are you going to give up to get those guys? But is that the type of player that the Avs need more of? Or is this more in the top part of that roster? Again, not advocating for the Colorado Avalanche to trade Cale Makar, Gabriel Landeskog, or Nathan MacKinnon. I will declare them on this May 27th as untouchable. Avs have 3 untouchable players. The Denver Nuggets have one. Those three players, I don't want. That's one thing I don't. Some of you may not want Jared Bednar to get fired. That's your Jared Bednar's untouchable. Fine. Here are my untouchables: Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog. Leave them alone. Figure out what you need to figure out with everybody else on the roster. And here's the conundrum that the Colorado Avalanche are going to be facing here this offseason. Like, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to mold yourself into the image of Vegas and saying we want an even more defensive-oriented, tight-checking, high-pressure team that's going to be opportunistic, which is another way to say we're not going to be a wagon offensively as much so as we were this year. And we want to be do you want to be the Vegas Golden Knights or do you want to beat them? Because if the Avalanche assess this and say Vegas is a bad matchup for us, I would argue that they need more top-end talent. As difficult as that's going to be to acquire and as difficult as that is to say, given the fact that they have, the league leader in goals and they have the best defenseman in the world and Marty Necas had a career year scoring goals. But is it like the Denver Nuggets where you need different kinds of top six players? The Denver Nuggets need shot creators. That sounds like something that the Avalanche need. I mean, it would be great if they got a bunch of Cale Makars this offseason, but the premise of Cale Makar being able to slip away from defenders and be able to get his shots off, is that something that a Brock Nelson, a Marty Necas cannot do when it matters the most? But you see my part of the point here when it comes to Jared Bednar. If I may be so bold as to bring him back in the conversation or get back on his rear end, John Tortorella. Kind of seems like that's very complicated. Top six, middle six, bottom six. Who are you going to trade? You're going to give up Marty Necas? Is Marty Necas the guy? All very confusing. So quite a quagmire that they have when it comes to the roster if they deem that the roster needs changes. One stroke of a pen, one phone call, not to be callous about it or flippant about it, but is the catalyst that you need the easier one to make, the easier decision to make? Replacing Jared Bednar with somebody else will spark the entire team, Marty Necas and Brock Nelson included. I think if you are the most optimistic of Avalanche fans, which I would not put myself in that group, just about anything in life in general, just not the way I roll. Glass mostly half empty for me in every facet of my life, but that's neither here nor there. If you're one of the most optimistic fans, I think you would say that simply the shock of this season ending this way is the spark that they need. That maybe they thought that they were all that, and now they are shown quite plainly and obviously that they are not all that. Is that enough? Is this the reincarnation or the 2.0 version of I've been in the league going on 9 years and I haven't won bleep? I mean, the Avs didn't completely change their roster 1 year to the next after they lost to Vegas, but there was an intent. There was an ethos that team had that was maybe a little bit different than 2021. That's what you hope, but then I ask the question, where did that message go? Where did that realization go? Why didn't they have that? Didn't they understand what it took? By the way, you haven't heard from Nathan McKinnon at all today, have you? You have not. I'll just answer my own question. There's a reason for that. See if you like it coming up next. Nathan McKinnon is viewed as one of the leaders of the Avalanche team. And his leadership style is a little bit different than Gabriel Landeskog's. His is, I would call it a physical type of leadership. Right? When he's flying around, when he's throwing his body around and crushing guys into the glass and all of this kind of stuff, it fires up the team, but also the effort that he plays with does make other players elevate their game. We've seen that. So when you're, and I guess another way to say physical leadership would be lead by example. So Nathan McKinnon is more of a leader by example than maybe Gabriel Landeskog, who kind of blends all the different kinds of leadership styles in one, but is certainly more the type of leader that's going to pull somebody aside on the bench or in the dressing room and lead that way, right? Nathan McKinnon doesn't seem like a chatty guy a lot of times. So when somebody like that, we had a text earlier talking about how, frustrated the Avalanche were getting. The number one guy that you noticed was Nathan McKinnon. And you wonder if that is the best way to go in that moment. I know you are who you are, and I'm not, Tigers changing stripes and all of that kind of stuff. But in that moment, as much as Nathan McKinnon wears his emotions on his sleeve, is that a moment where you got, for your teammates, you need to display a different kind of body language? I'm not asking the guy to turn into, a rah-rah guy and put his arm around his teammates and say, we'll get through this together. But just when he slumps his shoulders, which isn't a lot, right? This Avalanche team lived a very charmed life up until this series with Vegas. But when he slumps his shoulders, I got to imagine a couple of other sets of shoulders get slumped. If Nathan McKinnon is frustrated by what Vegas is doing to him, what chance do I have as a second, third, fourth liner of being able to do anything against this Vegas team, right? So I think there are times where Nathan McKinnon would be, the Avalanche, I should say, would be better served if Nathan McKinnon would be a little bit more stoic. And it's a balance, right? And it's a difficult balance to strike because sometimes you need to be stoic and you need to put out maybe a different vibe than what you are feeling on the inside. But you also don't want to lose who you are, because who Nathan McKinnon is has benefited the Avs greatly. His leadership style has benefited the Colorado Avalanche, but there are moments where, I don't know if tack's the right word, where you just need to exude more confidence than Nathan McKinnon appeared to in that game. He was shaking it. We all saw the video of him shaking his head during Game 3 when the Avalanche could not get a single shot in on Carter Hart, as he's frustrated because he took the puck to the knee and he's limited, but he's sitting there on the bench shaking his head about how the Avs cannot break down the Vegas Golden Knights. And it happened again. You saw sometimes the ESPN cameras, it looked like a defeated team the longer that game wore on. And Nathan McKinnon was one of those. And I think there are moments where you don't change who you are, but you say, you know what? I need to control my emotions, my body language, because I know it has an effect on the guys around me. This is not the time for me to be frustrated, angry Nathan McKinnon. And there was another step beyond that after the game that I also did not like. Nathan MacKinnon was not made available to the media last night because he was getting treatment, as if he doesn't have the entirety of the offseason to get treatment. Maybe that was the Avalanche organization protecting him. I kind of think they did so at his direction. How could you not say that regardless of the result, Nathan MacKinnon is going to be available to reporters? And this is not me sticking up for my brethren and say, you know, they got a job to do and readers and viewers want to hear from Nathan MacKinnon. This is not a pro media versus athlete stance here. This is an extension of Nathan MacKinnon when his team needed him the most as one of the leaders of this team. It seemed like he wasn't there in the way he needed to be. He was angry, he was frustrated, and he didn't want to face what the Avalanche were facing. That's how all of this comes across. And it's not a great look. This is the last game of the season. There's no more. You could go away to wherever you want to go, any corner of the globe, and be away from the cameras and interviews and all that kind of stuff. You were there one more night as one of the leaders of this team, as arguably the best player on the team, and you don't even, I'm not even saying at the podium, or it's not a podium, it's a table, but like you're not even available in the locker room to answer for that. I think that's really poor form on Nathan MacKinnon's part, because he's leaving all of his teammates to answer for something that he is just as culpable in. And this isn't, you know, we don't need to go crazy here. We can criticize and not like something and also not want him to be traded. Nobody wants Nathan MacKinnon to be traded. He is far more of a net positive for this team than a net negative. I'm just saying that was a bad look. And that continued the bad looks that Nathan MacKinnon and the bad body language Nathan MacKinnon was giving off at the end of that game. We'll go one more text here. Let Albert have the last say on where the Avs go from here. Goodbye, Natchez and Nelson. Avs need more grit, less perfection. Goodbye, Landeskog before he ages out. Goodbye, Wedgwood. I'd take a bag of pucks and a case of beer for him. I think certainly with Scott Wedgwood, I don't know that that's the return I would be willing to get. I got to think Edmonton would maybe offer a little bit more than that. But I think your point is well taken, that it's time to parlay Scott Wedgwood into something else. Mackenzie Blackwood showed last night he's worth investing in next year. Scott Wedgwood, as brilliant of a season as he had, that is over and done with. If you could trade him and improve your team, you do it. Talk to you tomorrow.